Thank you all so very much. It's great to be home. And I say that advisedly because my mother came from this end of the world, and I probably have relatives all over this stadium here tonight. Members of the Board of Trustees, President Malafaria, Mr. Provost, Dean Smith, thank you all for having me back. And I want to start with something I hadn't actually planned on saying when I wrote the speech. I have the advantage of having worked here 20 years ago and having been away from this campus now for 15 years with a few visits now and again to see old friends. And I will tell you, this is a transformed campus. Over the last day and a half, my wife and I have seen an institution that is on the move, that's growing in stature, with faculty members who are doing exciting things around the world and are making a difference in their community, with students who are truly engaged with the institution, and with members of the Board of Trustees who care deeply about the future of this Commonwealth and of this end of the state. And it is really, really heartening as a student of higher education to see what an institution, when it puts its mind to it and has great leadership, can do. And it is just a real pleasure to be back here and to have an opportunity to see what has happened to this wonderful institution. I know that you're working with your legislature on the possibility of being named a university, but you know, in fact, you are a university. You are a superb university doing a great job for the people of this Commonwealth, and that is to everyone's benefit. I review other universities, both for our regional accrediting body and for the NCAA, and I'm regularly on other campuses, and this was a real pleasure. It has absolutely been a pleasure to be back here. I want to spend just a few minutes with you today talking about your futures and about the world into which you're commencing. And I want to maybe put a little different bracket around some of the things you've heard from President Malafaria and from Chairman Ricciardi, and to maybe use back a step from it, because you're leaving this university, this institution, this college, at a time of great uncertainty. Unemployment in the Commonwealth is in excess of 9%, and I'm sure there are areas of the state where it is even worse than that. We are in the deepest recession since the Great Depression, and it's very clear that we're not going to come out of it by July 1st. This is going to be a recession that lingers with us for years and where we build back jobs over time, not instantaneously. It's also a world in which the change that is happening is unbelievably rapid. Now, most of us who follow international trade and international economics have heard of the BRICS: Brazil, India, Russia, and China, and they're going to be the next big competitors. But if you follow the European news or you listen to the BBC, the commentators are now talking about a whole other set of countries that they're calling the pigs. And that has multiple meanings. Portugal, Italy or Ireland, substitute which you prefer, Greece, and Spain. Greece's economy is on the verge of collapse. Spain may well go into default. Portugal's trying to prevent it. So's Italy, and Ireland's not quite sure what it's going to do either. And if you follow that, that has huge implications for the future. So at a time when China may be pulling out of the recession and the United States is showing some life, we're seeing Southern Europe begin to recede, and we're seeing the European Union facing the biggest crisis it's had since its founding. And the real question is, what's going to happen to the euro, and what's going to happen to trade that will affect every one of us sitting here in Bridgewater tonight? Think about a currency where you have 27 different countries using the currency. Each country has a separate monetary policy, it has a separate economic development policy, has a separate investment policy, has a separate labor policy, and all of them come together to try to create a value in a currency. It would be as if all 50 of our states could each have formal policies that differed from each other so dramatically that they affected the dollar, and that the national government would have no control over what happened to that dollar. Quite a frightening prospect, but it has implications here locally. Because of the amount of trade that goes on between the Commonwealth and Europe, it will affect you here. Now, all of us are familiar with these kinds of changes, but when I was a student and then when I was a faculty member teaching in a sociology department, There was a really popular book, one that all of us had to read. I made all my students read it. It was Paul Ehrlich's The Population Bomb. And the theory behind the population bomb was that, we had the wealthy countries like us, and then there was all these third world countries out here that would never be anything. Because as soon as they got a little money, they just have a lot more babies and go right back into poverty. And so the idea was that these weren't the underdeveloped countries, these were the never-to-be-developed countries. And one of those never-to-be-developed countries was Korea. It's now the largest producer of computer chips in the world. Another never-to-be-developed country was China. Those of you who are old enough will remember when the IBM PC swept the United States and changed our view of computing. It was the future of computing at the time it came out. Well, IBM sold out to Lenovo, a Chinese company, and they now make the IBM PC under Lenovo label in the Research Triangle in North Carolina. And the Chinese economy is coming back with a roar, and our economy is coming back slowly. So these never-to-be-developed countries, like India, are now the world's leading producers of computer software. And you have countries in the Middle East and countries now beginning in Africa, South Africa, for example, that are beginning to take a leadership role and see themselves as different than where they were. They're no longer the never-to-be-developed countries. They're the BRICS, and they're the people who are emerging as the next generation of competitors. Well, we're all familiar with that story if we listen to the news or we watch or we read the newspapers or we get onto Google or get onto Yahoo. We know that story. But there's another side to that story, and it's an interesting one, in that at the same time the economy is globalizing, at the same time we're seeing these massive trends of movement of people and finance around the world, we're also seeing those movements aggregate in 40 clusters, big super regional clusters around the world. Richard Florida at the University of Toronto has identified these clusters, and so he talks about not that the world is flat, but that the world is spiky, and that there are these 40 clusters where the economy and where the world's wealth is going to be continuously developed. Currently, those 40 clusters have only 18% of the world's population, but they have 40% of the world's production. 10 of those clusters are in the United States, and you live in the largest one of them. You live in the Northeastern Corridor, which is the biggest single economic cluster in the United States. At its base is finance. It has 50 million people. I live in a cluster that's called Charlotte, after Charlotte and Atlanta, the two biggest cities. If Charlotte were a nation, it would have an economy as large as India's. So these are very powerful economic entities, and you're right in the middle of one. And it's historically based on finance as its power. But the future isn't in finance. The future is in innovation and entrepreneurship. And I'm not talking only about innovation in business and entrepreneurship in business, but how we create better lives for ourselves and our children, and how we do so in a way that promulgates our ability to keep employment high, to keep wealth moving, and to assure the quality of lives for ourselves and our children. That's where the future is, and that's what Bridgewater has prepared you to do. If I were your president, I would be talking right now about a charge to the students. And the charge that I would give you is based in a model called Stewards of Place. And it's really, really important that you as graduates understand that your core role in the future has to be more than about making a living. If this country is to succeed, if your family is to succeed, if your community is to succeed, you really need to think seriously about being a steward of place, ministering, not being ministered unto. What does being a steward of place mean? Well, first of all, it means that you together create a community that has a vibrant, diversified economy. It means you innovate, you think about the future, you find ways to support each other and to support the lifestyles of the people of your community. So you have to have a vibrant economy at its base. That's a given. Secondly, you have to have a very high quality of life, and the only way that's going to happen is if you're actively involved in your community. And what does it mean to have a high quality of life? It means that your streets are safe. It means that your environment is clean. It means that your schools are good, that your health care is strong. It means that you have really fine arts facilities, that you value culture, that you care about the quality of your community. And the only way that's going to happen is if you take an active part. So that's the second dimension. You've got to have a vibrant economy, and you've got to have a high quality of life. The third dimension is participatory governance. Now, New England has a history of town meetings and town councils where people can come together, but it's critical that you keep that going and that you actively participate in making the decisions about the future of your community, about the future of the Commonwealth, because together you can create the other elements of this model by participating. So your education is much more than about making a living. It's about being an active member of the community. It's about valuing the community. It's about making sure that your family has a future. But there's one more element to it, and that's inclusiveness. Inclusiveness. Look, competition is just too great. It's just too great. And if every member of the community is not a part of that community and have a chance to achieve and be part of the group, then you're losing brain power, and you're losing capacity, and you're losing social justice. And the bottom line is, in the end, your community will not be as strong as it could be. And so as you leave this institution, as you leave this wonderful college, think broadly about your role. Clearly, you're going to try to make a living. But think about innovation. Think about being entrepreneurial in the way you help get things done in your community. Consider the value of the quality of life in your community, and together, you can create a future that really does protect our children and grandchildren and assure that you have good quality of life as well. That's really the message. And it's a difficult message, it's a tough message, in the sense that these are difficult times in which to take on these tasks. But you've got the skills. I worked with most of these faculty. I know their quality. And I know that if you're graduating, you have got a great education. To every one of you, congratulations on a great job well done. And I look forward to seeing what the next generation of this great college does. Again, thank you.